Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. So today we're reading from Srimad Bhagavatam, Canto 10, 13th chapter, text 41. Yāvanto gokule bālāḥ sa-vatsāḥ sarva evahi māyā-āśaye śayānā me nādyāpi punar utthitāḥ yāvanto gokule bālāḥ sa-vatsāḥ sarva evahi māyā-āśaye śayānā me nādyāpi punar utthitāḥ yāvanto gokule bālāḥ sa-vatsāḥ sarva evahi māyā-āśaye śayānā me nādyāpi punar utthitāḥ yāvantaḥ whatsoever, as many as, gokule in Gokula, bālāḥ boys, sa-vatsāḥ along with their calves, sarve all, eva indeed, he because, māyā-āśaye on the bed of Maya, śayānāḥ are sleeping, me my, na not, adya today, api even, punaḥ again, utthitāḥ have risen. Translation: Lord Brahmā thought, whatever boys and calves there were in Gokula, I have kept them sleeping on the bed of my mystic potency, and to this very day they have not yet risen again. Report by His Divine Grace, A.C. Bhakti-Vedanta Swami Srila Prabhupada. For 1 year, Lord Brahmā kept the calves and boys lying down in a cave by his mystic power. Therefore, when Brahmā saw Lord Krishna still playing with all the cows and calves, he began trying to reason about what was happening. What is this? He thought. Maybe I took those calves and cowherd boys away, but now they have taken from that cave. Now they have been taken from that cave. Is that what has happened? Has Krishna brought them back here? Then, however, Lord Brahmā saw that the calves and boys he had taken were still in the same mystic Maya into which he had put them. Thus he concluded that the calves and cowherd boys now playing with Krishna were different from the ones in the cave. He could understand that although the original calves and boys were still in the cave where he had put them, Krishna had expanded himself. And so the present demonstration of calves and boys consisted of expansions of Krishna. They had the same features, the same mentality, and the same intentions, but they were all Krishna. Translation: Lord Brahmā thought, whatever boys and calves there were in Gokula, I have kept them sleeping on the bed of my mystic potency, and to this very day, they have not yet risen again. Om Ajnana Timirandasya Gyananjana Salakaya Chakshulan Militam Jaina Tasmai Sri Gurave Namaha Sri Chaitanya Mano Bhistam Stapitam Jaina Bhutale Svaya Rupa Kadamayam Dadati Sva Patandikam Panchakopa Tirubhishcha Kripa Sindhubhya Evacha Patitanam Pavanebhyo Vaishnavebhyo Namo Namaha Jaya Sri Krishna Chaitanya Prabhu Nityananda Sri Advaita Gadadhar Sivasari Gaur Bhaktivinda Hare Krishna 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 Hare 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 Ram Rama Rama Hare Hare. Hare Krishna. So I think the last day I gave class was the first day of Kartik. So somehow Dharmatma Prabhu said, even though following Indrajumna Maharaj is certainly not an easy thing to do, but he said, well, everyone's different. So today, last day of Kartik. Some say yesterday was last day of Kartik. Some say today is Purnima. Some say tomorrow is Purnima. So still bewildered, Maharaj. Everything is bewildering. We're close. Also, today we have an eclipse, although it's not visible here, so we don't talk about the eclipse here. I also gave class on the last eclipse, so everything is eclipsed here today. So forgive me even attempting to give class on this. I found an interesting letter yesterday by Srila Prabhupada. I said before, Prabhupada knew I was not much at reading books, even though I was with him. Probably because every time he saw me, he didn't see a book in my hands. That would be a giveaway that I wasn't reading books. Other devotees, servants, he would come in and they'd be sitting there reading his Bhagavatam, his Bhagavad-Gita. He'd be very pleased. But me, he had to tell me to read his books. But I have found I really like reading his conversations, and I like reading his letters, because it's very personal. His conversations are personal. So somehow or other we have to find that place in Krishna consciousness, huh? So we can remain. So I found this letter yesterday, and I wanted to read it. Prabhupada gives a very, as he always does, he answering questions. This is 1971, and it was from a bhaktin at that time. 1971 is when I entered New Vrindavan. He says, as far as your questions, Krishna is not in need of anything. He is Purnam, the complete whole, and yet he appreciates our love for him, just like everyone appreciates if someone exhibits love for them. So he kindly allows us to show that love by considering that if I do not feed him, Krishna will go hungry. If I don't give him rest, he will be tired. Just like I was with Prabhupada for some time, and he rang the bell one afternoon. In New Dwarka, we call it the old temple room in New Dwarka, which became the Fate Museum, the doll museum. But that was the temple room. And at the back of the temple room, up on what you would call the first floor, was Prabhupada's apartment, his flat. So the deities were resting. It was like 3 o'clock in the afternoon. Prabhupada rang the bell. I went in. He said, who's chanting japa? It wasn't even a kirtan. With japa, someone was chanting japa. Around Prabhupada, sometimes devotees like to exhibit how Krishna conscious they were in their chanting of japa. They would often chant louder than normally, so that Prabhupada could see they were very sincere. But it always was the opposite. Prabhupada would say, why are they chanting so loudly? And with this devotee, he said, tell them the deities are resting. Yes, Prabhupada. So I went down and said, Prabhupada, get out of the temple room. The deities are resting. This is how we see Krishna. He's a person. Prabhupada even said the dog is a person. To speak of the cows, we're talking about the cow herd boys, the calves, the cows. Everyone is person because personality is there. Here we have beds in the deity room for when they take rest. We have air conditioning in there. Some people may think it's for the pujaris. We have heat in there in the wintertime. No, in the summertime, right? 4 o'clock in the morning, Mangalarti, you open the door in the summer and the cool air would come out because it's on all night long for Krishna and Balaram. Why does Krishna need air conditioning? But that's how we develop Krishna consciousness. I learned with Prabhupada, we learn these things through him. We develop love from him, just like it's described here. And when Krishna took the forms of the cowherd boys and the calves, they became more lovable to their parents, to the cows, more lovable. And I saw that with Prabhupada. That's what he did to all of us. He was lovable. You couldn't see Prabhupada and not immediately just fall in love with him. It didn't matter if you were a devotee, non-devotee, reporter. You see the teachers that would come to see him, lawyers, whoever came to see him. He had a way of just charming you. It was his mystic opulence. It was because Krishna was right there in the heart of Prabhupada. Krishna is all attractive. His devotee is all attractive. You know, again, the letters. I see a letter, I've seen that letter. Prabhupada said, there was not one time I can remember. Well, there was not one time when I did not remember Krishna in his whole life. He said his memory went back. He remembered being in the arms of his older sister. He said maybe 6 months old. His memory was so wonderful. But to associate with him, he just endeared you more and more. And he knew how to do it, what it is. If you required philosophy, he could fill your head with so much philosophy. He'd bewilder you. That one story with Madhvisa Prabhu on the airplane. Madhvisa Prabhu, very intelligent devotee, practically established. Once Upendra and him went there, he was in charge, GBC there of Australia for so many years. Prabhupada went there like 8 times to Australia, which means basically you just go to Australia and you have to come back. It's not on the way. It's not like you go from Los Angeles to Hawaii to Japan. It's like a hop and a skip. No, you go to Australia and you're just stuck in Australia. Then you have to fly back to some other India and start all over again. But he went there so many times. The whole country of Australia at that time had like 5 million people in it. New York City or Delhi, what did they have? 20 million people, one city. The whole country of Australia was just a few million people. I never realized that at the time, and yet Prabhupada kept going there, installed the deities, gave lectures to save everyone in Australia. So Madhvisa, what was I saying? Prabhupada, he was on the plane with Prabhupada. So Prabhupada wanted to argue with him, philosophical. So he said, you take position of Mayavadi. I'll be the Vaishnava. So he did, and they're going back and forth, and of course, Prabhupada defeated him. We know that. Vaishnava's highest philosophy, highest understanding. But then they switched sides, and Prabhupada took the side, he was Mayavad, and Madhvisa Prabhu, he was the Vaishnava, and Prabhupada defeated him. Could not defeat Prabhupada. He could have done that to all of us. He could have turned us all into nice Mayavadi. But he didn't, because he's a lover of Krishna. And he saw Krishna. You have to take care of Krishna. He knew if Krishna was not being fed nicely. He made arrangements. He would go up there, greet the deities. He wasn't just greeting the deities like I greet the deities. He's there talking with Krishna. And Krishna would say sometimes, this dal is like mud. Because Prabhupada would say, this dal you're cooking, your Rajbhog, dal is like mud. The rice is mushy, chapatis are hard. Puris, they gave the deities, of course, puris. So we take care of Krishna in that way. Not that, he's the supreme, we close the doors, he's running around here and there. No, 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 they need to be taken care of. Bathe them, we dress them. Learning how to love Krishna. And of course, Krishna reciprocates so much. I started out somehow or other, I was a city boy, Philadelphia. Philadelphia is just kind of under New York City. Everyone knows New York City. But I came from a city, 5 million people, much as the whole of Australia. 5 million people lived in Philadelphia. But somehow or other, as soon as I joined, I was in New Vrindavan. And I started out, like I say, right at the top. I started out as a cowherd boy, very enthusiastic, watching the cows. And I got to see they had personalities. We all have personalities. You see here, if you come back and forth every day on the street outside, same cows are there every day. The same calves are there every day. There's that one cow, she puts her nose right inside the gate 3 because she gets chapatis there. And she'll stay there until they give her her chapatis. Her calves always with her. In New Vrindavan, we got to learn. Of course, we had the cows, Kunti, Saraswati, Surabi, of course, one of the first cows on the farm back in 1971. And they were all different. It's like we're all different. They were all different. They would go out, you have the barn, and from the barn you have different gates going into different pasture grounds. So they would go to one pasture ground for a week or so. And even in those hills, you could see the grooves where they all walked. One after the other, they made little pathways. And they would just use those same pathways every day, and then they would go off and eat a little grass here and there. And then when the time had come, you could call them, but sometimes you didn't even have to call them because they knew what time it was. Because they would go into the barn, and they all had their own stalls, separate stalls. There was like 10 of them. And you would put the grain in front of the stall where they would go, each one. Very nice grain. You had sorghum, sweet kind of stuff, and corn and this and that. Things you didn't get out in the field. And they would all go into their prescribed stall, just like it had a name on it. But they all knew where they would go. But some of the cows, they were more hungry than the others. So they would get to the first stall and try to eat the grain there, and then the one that was supposed to go in there would get all upset, and they would be arguing with each other, bullying each other, and then you'd have to guide them into the proper space. And then while they're eating grain, not paying attention, that's when you milk them. That was the trick, so that they were distracted by the nice food stuff in front of them. Then you had to learn how to milk them. And they were all different too. Some of them were very pleasant. Some of them would, as soon as you grabbed them, they'd kick you. They'd kick the bucket over. And they knew what they were doing, because they were persons. Krishna's a person. This is what Prabhupada keeps showing us. All these pastimes, you see this personality of Krishna, and how by showing him love, he reciprocates. This letter went on. If I don't give him rest, he'll be tired, like that. He reciprocates by pretending to be dependent on me, my slave, just to give us opportunity to find the real object of our loving propensity and to take pleasure by pleasing and serving him. Everything we do should be for the reason that it gives pleasure to Krishna. Say that again. Everything we do should be for the reason that it gives pleasure to Krishna, because Krishna's intimate associates give him the most pleasure. That's how you become intimate. It's all you think about, how to please Krishna. And of course for us, how to please the spiritual master. We were speaking yesterday, Maharaj was talking about the, what is it? Geez, I now forgot the term. Very simple term. Transparent via media. And Maharaj, you said it the same way I mention it. The transparent via media, it goes both ways. It's not a one-way transparency. The spiritual master, he's everything he receives through his spiritual master, through the chain of disciplic succession, he's giving to you perfectly. Prabhupada, how many times will you see Prabhupada say in his books, in his lectures, if I've done anything, it's that I haven't changed. One word of what was given to me by my spiritual master. That's where the potency is. Purity. That's what purity means. It means you don't adulterate. Not one thing. Thinking I need to change it. 50 years have gone by. I hear some people say, it's dated. It needs to be adjusted. Prabhupada said, what has changed? Birth, old age, disease, and death, they're still there. So you have prettier buildings. Not prettier, but you have more modern facility, everything quicker, easier, of course, until it breaks down. But the transparency also goes the other way. We have to be transparent. Just want to serve in that same way, understanding what's coming down, and to serve without any other desire. Because Krishna's intimate associates give him the most pleasure, and because they are his favorites, it pleases him to see these associates and close friends are also offered all respect by the devotees. This is why we have this Guru Puja every day. Prabhupada made so many arrangements. He's a very intimate associate, very much loved by Krishna, because he loves Krishna very much, the most. 24 hours a day, he would say. I still try to understand that. Prabhupada would say, you never become tired doing devotional service. You become more eager, more enthused to serve. I can understand my level of service is not very good. I become tired. I look forward to taking rest so I can get up in the morning, be there for Mangal Arti. But Prabhupada wasn't like that. He said, I hate sleeping. Told me twice. I hate it. Waste of time. He was so eager, always preaching Krishna consciousness, giving Krishna to others. So much joy. That was his joy, seeing us, sitting there on the Vyasa-san, pointing to where it is, sitting on his Vyasa-san, seeing us jumping up and down. It gave him so much pleasure. One person asked him, do you have a room for yoga? You do yoga? Prabhupada said, yes, we jump up and down, we dance. That's our yoga. That's what he would say. Others would insist we should do, yes, you do. Prabhupada was always ultimately accepting. So many things he said about astrology, waste of time. One devotee went in one day, next day, talking to one to be astrologer, came out saying, Prabhupada said, yes, very nice, you do that service. That was Prabhupada's compassion, somehow or other to engage you, to purify you. But we have to try to understand what he wanted us to do. Even myself, I'll have young devotees come up to me, God brothers or my guru, and they'll ask me, should I do this or should I do this service, or should I say, why? I say, you have a spiritual master? They say, yes. I say, well, why don't you ask him? Because they know, he'll say no. So you try to find a person, that person who agrees with you. Yeah, that's a good program. Then they're happy. But no, my spiritual master, he'll tell me that's not good, that's not right. Tulsi Devi is part of Krishna's entourage. She is Krishna-ized, or Krishna conscious. And in this pure state, she has all the qualities of Krishna. And therefore she becomes worshipable, just like Krishna. So again, this is what Prabhupada gave us. We're worshiping the deity, then we worship Tulsi Devi, we order Tulsi Devi, and then just like Vrinda Devi, Prabhupada gave us Guru Puja every day to keep that link with him, to serve him, glorify him, each and every day. And if you weren't there, like I mentioned in the last class, if you weren't there, he'd let you know, where were you? The people that were with him, Prabhupada knew, if you were on the morning walk, if you weren't on the morning walk, if you weren't at Guru Puja, if you weren't at class, if you didn't rise early in the morning, he'd call you on it. Where were you? Why are you sleeping? Dead men. You know, he called us dead men. And he could have done it so many times. But when he did it, what did you feel? He cared. He cared for us. He had love for us. He just wanted us to become Krishna conscious. He wasn't taking anything. He was giving, always giving. It's almost finished, just one little last thing. There is a saying, Prabhupada used this one often, love me, love my dog. It is like that. To approach the president is very difficult unless you are the friend of his son or daughter. Then it becomes very easy. So worship of Tulsi Devi, he doesn't mention himself. This is also devotee. He could just be saying, you take care of me, you worship me, you serve me. No, he wouldn't dare say that. He says, so worship of Tulsi Devi and other of Lord Krishna's entourage. That's Prabhupada. That's what I see all the time. So many things here. It's so much over my head. But I know one thing. If I serve Prabhupada, he takes care of everything. He reciprocates. Reciprocation is there. One devotee, he passed away, Maharaj, last year before, and we knew him as Mukunlal. Early on, 1971, he would write Srila Prabhupada. There's a few letters, because Prabhupada in his books talks about the purpose, the importance of worshiping Lord Nityananda. If you don't take the shelter of Lord Nityananda, then nothing, you go nowhere, nothing. So of course that's what we can read like that, and then we think, well, I should put all my energy into doing that. Prabhupada says, if I don't worship Lord Nityananda, then everything is useless, wasting our time. So one letter came, then the next letter came, and finally Prabhupada said, the spiritual master, that's Lord Nityananda for you. And the spiritual master, he represents Lord Nityananda. Just worship your spiritual master. Sometimes he just would have to come out and say it, because we're so dense. Because he uses words like this: worship of Tulsi Devi and other of Lord Krishna's entourage is part of the total devotional attitude of pleasing Krishna. And Prabhupada made it so very easy to please him. He would always say, just chant Hare Krishna. Whatever was going on, he would always bring it back to that point. You chant Hare Krishna. And so much service he's given. There was once, I cooked for Prabhupada many, many times, hundreds of lunches, over 500 lunches, all in his cooker, that miracle cooker. I said my best friend, the cooker was my best friend. So it was in Bhaktivedanta Manor. Prabhupada stayed there for 2 months, 1973. I was 22 years old, and I had been with him now for almost a year. Every day cooking, every day massaging and cooking is going on at the same time. And just like coming and giving class, I would always be in anxiety. So many classes, every class, we were talking the other day. For me, it never stops. Dharmatma was very nice. He told me yesterday that I was giving class today, so I only had 1 day of anxiety instead of a week of anxiety. Instead of preparing, I just go into anxiety. That's my nature. But I only had the 1 day. So, same thing. Every day I did it. For over 2 years, I would massage Prabhupada, and while I'm massaging him, the cooker's in some other place. Sometimes a different building. Sometimes same building, but always in a little kitchen area. And I would always be in anxiety as I was massaging him. It was always in the back of my mind, sometimes in the front, but always in the back. What's going on with that cooker? And Prabhupada, he knows everything. He knows what's going on. Imagine, he knows everyone. Imagine how well he knew the person that was with him 24 hours a day. And somehow or other, he made you comfortable. So I'd be massaging and thinking about the cooker. So this one day, the devotee boy, he said, "Can I cook for Prabhupada?" So I said, yes. It never, dawned on me. I never considered, I was 22. He was 8 years younger than me. He was 14. 14-year-old boy. I just wrote him yesterday about the event. So I said yes. I thought, no anxiety today. That was a mistake. You can't free yourself from anxiety. It magnified my anxiety after Prabhupada ate. or when he was about to eat. That little anxiety I had massaging him, doing that little bit of service, preparing his lunch, making chapati dough, rolling chapatis, cooking chapatis, making sure they all puffed up. That was my anxiety for Krishna, for Prabhupada. Krishna's intimate associate. That was my anxiety. And it was very manageable. It was there every day. Anxiety for Krishna is a very wonderful thing. It's a source of our happiness. That's Krishna consciousness. Who can understand? So I let him cook. So then massage happens. After massage, routine, every day, same routine. Just like the deity. Punctual. You know that 4:30, that door is going to open up. Boy's going to come out 4:29, blow the conch shell. 4:30. Prabhupada was like that. He, every day, massage would be finished. He would walk off. Could see his oil footprints on the ground as he walked towards taking his bath. Always took a bath out of a bucket with his lota. Never a shower. You could have the prettiest 10 shower heads. You know, now that's our progress. You think that's different, right? Therefore, Prabhupada's outdated, because now we have showers. You can be hit every side of your body. We think that's progress. Prabhupada used a bucket like that. Then after he bathed, gumsha was there, towel was there, dry. His clothes, every day I put his clothes across the bed. Every day. Kurta, dhoti, kopin, 2 kopin pieces. If it was cold, fresh pair of socks were there. If it was really, really cold, pair of long underwear. It's a person, just like with the deity. And now they're wearing chadars. Was it 2 weeks ago they were, no, not even a kurta 2 weeks ago. That's Vrindavan. You get 2 weeks, boom, summer, winter, just like that. Prabhupada's long underwear were there. And if I was around, I would help him put them on, his long underwear. They were also saffron. By the way, saffron is the color of the inside of a conch shell. Prabhupada said, that's the color of saffron. If you want to know what saffron is, look inside the conch shell. You'll see the saffron color. So if I was there, I would help him put them on. When I left Prabhupada the first time, Satsut Maharaj became his servant. And it was winter time. It was the very end of 1973 in Los Angeles. It was cold, like here, it get very cold. And I told him all the different things I did. Satsrup, he was writing everything down. How to massage, where you start, how you move the hands, you know, how to lay out the clothes on the bed. He was the only person ever had notes for how to become Prabhupada's servant. You know, how to be the pujari. Right? Mukundadad, he's been given classes last 3 days. How to be pujari. We had no classes, but he had a class. He actually grilled me for days how to be Prabhupada's servant. So then I told him, socks are there, long underwear are there, everything just all set up, just like taking care of the deity. Prabhupada is our deity. Now we see the deity of Prabhupada. Then he was moving deity. So wonderful. This is the process, how you learn. So then when I saw him later on, he said, you said how you would help Prabhupada put on his long underwear. He said, he doesn't let me help him. So I just said, I don't know. But me, he let do these things. And it was such a wonderful thing to do. So anyway, he cooks for him that day, this 14-year-old. And he made dal, rice, chapatis, some sabjis, was an Indian birth. What's his name? Srutakirti, Srutakirti, that whole family. It was the son, the eldest son. So then Prabhupada would dress, and he'd sit behind on his asana, put on his tilak. You could see every day. Probably the amount of times he did his circle was the same every day. He was so regulated. The drops of water, you could count the drops of water, same amount of drops of water in his hand to rub that chandan in. Put his tilak on all over his body. Then he'd sit straight, chant Gayatri mantra. When he's done Gayatri mantra, he'd bring in the prasadam. That was perfection. If he had to wait, you already messed up. You didn't do the best you can do. Because that's what we want to do. We want to be the best we can be. Otherwise, you don't get this intimacy here. You got to be the best you can be. Every moment, how to serve Krishna. That's what Prabhupada says here. Huh? Every moment, how can I serve Krishna? How can I serve the spiritual master? The lunch was a disaster. Went in and the boy served him, and Prabhupada's looking, this child. And then he left the room, and Prabhupada's saying, "Who's cooked?" I said, "He did." He said, "Didn't you help him?" And then I realized what a nonsense I was. Because my whole thought was, how can I not serve him? So I can have 20 minutes, a half hour for myself. To what? To be in Maya? What was I going to do? I wasn't reading books. That much we already knew. But what was I going to do with that spare time? Spare time, it means Maya. That's what it means, Maya. I said, no, Prabhupada. He said, how am I supposed to eat this? He put the chapatis on top of his rice, which was overcooked. So now you ever have a chapati sitting on top of something wet? It becomes wet. Not attractive at all. And the dal, he said, tastes like mud. Whenever the dal didn't taste good, mud was the word. Mud, he would say. He said it different times. Tastes like mud. Mine never tasted like mud. I was very fortunate. I guess it tasted like dal's supposed to taste. But here he said the dal's like mud. He said these chapatis, he said it's soft, wet. He said, how am I supposed to eat it? And then the boy comes back in, and Prabhupada looks at him and he smiles. He said, very nice. This is Prabhupada, and this is Krishna. This is the disciplic succession. It's what's happening with the heart, how you want to serve. We're successful, not successful. But here he wasn't going to chastise this boy, but boy, he chastised me, and I deserved it. That was nonsense. I was just looking for time off of my anxiety. Instead, I got 100 times anxiety by not pleasing him. And all the times I cooked, in 2.5 years, it was the only time he ever chastised me about my cooking. That was the only day, because I failed in my service. But then the next day, everything was back to normal. That was also Prabhupada's mercy, his compassion. He never brought it up again. If he chastised you about something, that was it, because it was in the past. Today is another day. We live in the present, like Bhakti-Vinod Thakur states so nicely. Live in times that are with thee, in progress you will call. It's all we have is right now. And right now means every moment. Like Prabhupada said in Australia, in an instant you can surrender. But those instants, they keep coming one after another. Doesn't mean you're finished. I've surrendered. It means constantly you have to surrender. That's Krishna consciousness. Anyway, we have a few minutes left. Can open up any questions, comments. We'll start with Maharaj.
Quite amazing that you cook about 500 lunches for Srila Prabhupada.
Yes.
Srila Prabhupada, I read in the lecture, Srila Prabhupada said that because you were speaking about Krishna's breast and so on, Srila Prabhupada said that when you sort of feed it, that if I do not feed this boy, he will die.
Yes. Yes.
Now, some days ago, maybe over some weeks ago, that you gave nice pastime to Srila Prabhupada in the Bālāḥ hall. But then in the morning I reminded you didn't say something that you were supposed to say about those sweets making in Los Angeles.
Yes, yes.
Let's go ahead.
Yes. Los Angeles, it was the world headquarters. So all the training was going there for the deity worship. As I mentioned before, Shalavati, she was the head pujari. She was also older than me. It's like 10 years older. She was already 30 years old, which was ancient when you're 20 years old. And she was seeing how I served Prabhupada, what I did. There's different things she came up with. I'm actually not talking about the sweets, but let's get into the sweets. In Los Angeles, we're Americans. We're creative people, and we streamline things. People see to America how it was a long time ago. Everyone, if you go into the stores, all the workers in the stores, they're all connected together. They can speak to each other, what the customers are doing. And then it went all around the world, these type of things. So anyway, because it takes a long time to make nice milk sweets. It's not something you throw together like a Simply Wonderful. That's an easy thing. But Prabhupada likes Simply Wonderfuls, but it wasn't his daily sweet either. It was nice for distribution, Simply Wonderful. Powdered milk, powdered sugar, and a little bit of butter, unsalted butter. That was it. You didn't cook it, just rolled it. Put it in the pan and roll it together. Very tasty. Could have a little coconut on it, whatever. But the morning sweets for Mangalarti, to make kheer, to make rabri, to make gulab jamun, to make rasgullas, it takes time. So they came up with a sweet in New Dwarka using puffed rice, which the puffed rice isn't like the puffed rice here. It was a different kind of puffed rice that was in a cereal box. So they would use that puffed rice, and then they would mix it with some dried fruit and crush up nuts and things, dates. It was sweet. It was tasty. And that became the daily sweet for the deities, Rukmini Dwarkadish, most opulent deities. That became their daily sweet. Every meal, sweets there. So I saw it, and I've always had some bit of common sense. So as soon as I saw this sweet, I thought, this is bogus. This is just not right. And I had my way of doing things because I was with Prabhupada. So, so of course, I put them on his plate. It wasn't anything I would give him, but I put it on his plate next to his sandesh, which was every day, sandesh. And Prabhupada has his lunch, eating lunch, and the sweets always, you end with the sweet. Prabhupada would end with his sweet. So I'm not in the room, I'm in and out of the room, But I already know what's going to happen. I could know. Just like Prabhupada knew. Sometimes you just know. So I come in finally to offer obeisances to take the plate away, and Prabhupada's, what is this? I said, Prabhupada, that's deity Maha. He said, what is it? I said, well, that's what they're making for the deities now. And he said, rascals. He said, this is nonsense. He says, who's inventing these things? He says, I've showed you what sweets to give. He called them, he said, Bengali sweets. He said, standard sweets. Rasgulla, sandesh, gulab jamun, kheer, like that. He said, why are they doing this? Then he would get into the whole Americans. You Americans change everything, want to change everything. Don't change anything. Do what he did. Who was successful in spreading Krishna consciousness around the world? I always say Prabhupada had dairy at every meal. Maybe it's because we're not drinking enough milk, you know? Because milk gives you the finer brain tissues to understand spiritual matters. See, I don't read a lot, but I heard a lot. I was also at, 800 lectures of Prabhupada's, so I did hear things sometimes. He always talked about the necessity of dairy. Krishna, that's what he eats. He said, you eat what you... But Krishna likes these milk sweets. Krishna likes sugar. He likes these things. The other one was, same thing, Shilavati. They would all hang around Prabhupada's room to try to hear Prabhupada from the doorway or catch a glimpse of him walking out of his room for a second. Anyway, and me, I talk. So I probably mentioned how I serve Prabhupada his lunch, bring him one chapati at a time, not put 5 chapatis on his plate. We do with the deities, 4, 5 puris, nice hot puris. No, we bring them one at a time. Every time you go in, you offer a basin, says, put the chapati down, run out of the room, make the next chapati so it's ready by the time he's finished that one. He would eat 5, 6 chapatis, sometimes more. So, of course, I guess Shilavati heard, the head pujari. So the one day she says to me, Shruta, she says, I'm serving the lordships, the deities, hot puris. I'm not bringing in 4, put them on the plate, bring the plate in. I'm bringing them in one at a time. After I put their plates on the altar, I go back into the kitchen, cook more puris, bring them hot puris. I'm thinking, that can't be right, It's very good not to have a lot of intelligence, because you just do what you're told. Over-intelligence can be very dangerous, because you think, I know better. You don't know better. You don't know anything. That's what you know by being so intelligent. You're a fool. So, of course, I went right to Prabhupada. Said, Prabhupada, Shilavati's bringing hot puris into the deities one at a time. He shakes his head. He said, who has told her this? I said, well, she knows that's how you get... He said, you can't do that. He said, you can't go in the deity room while they're eating. He said, that's not the process. He said, just follow the process. Don't change it. We're not just talking about puris and sweets. Everything. Don't change anything. What Prabhupada gave is perfect. We'll stop there. Srila Prabhupada ki jai.